If what you propose is ideologically acceptable, that is supportive of power systems, you can get away with a huge amount. In fact, the difference between the conditions that are imposed on dissident opinion and on mainstream opinion are radically different. I mean, I'll give you concrete examples if you like.
Yeah, do.
Okay, so for example, if I write about terrorism, say I've written about terrorism, and I think you can show without much difficulty that terrorism pretty much corresponds to power. I don't think that's very surprising. But the more powerful states are involved in more terrorism by and large, and the United States is the most powerful, so it's involved in massive terrorism by its own definition of terrorism. Well, if I want to establish that, I'm required to give a huge amount of evidence, and I think that's a good thing. I don't object to that. I think anyone who makes that claim should be held to very high standards. So extensive documentation from the internal secret record, from the historical record, and so on. And if you ever find a comma misplaced, somebody ought to criticize you for it. So I think those standards are fine. All right, now let's suppose that you play the mainstream game. So, for example, Yale University Press just came out with a volume called The Age of Terror. The contributors are leading historians, many of them at Yale, top people in the field. You read the book, The Age of Terror, first thing you notice is there isn't a single footnote. There isn't a single reference. They're just off the top of your head statements. Some of the statements are tenable, some are untenable, but there are no criteria. There are no intellectual criteria imposed. The reviews of the book are very favorable and laudatory, and maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. I mean, I happen to think a lot of it's wrong and demonstrably wrong, but it doesn't really matter. You can say anything you want because you're supporting power, and nobody expects you to justify anything. For example, if I was, say, on the unimaginable circumstance that I was on some, say, Nightline, and I was asked to say, do you think Gaddafi is a terrorist? I could say, yeah, Gaddafi's a terrorist. I don't need any evidence. Suppose I said George Bush is a terrorist. Well, then I would be expected to provide evidence. No, you can't just say that.
So but you aren't cut off right then.
See, and in fact, the structure of the news production system is you can't produce evidence. In fact, there's even a name for it. I learned it from the producer of Nightline, Jeff Greenfield. It's called concision. He was asked in an interview somewhere why they didn't have me on Nightline, and his answer was two answers. First of all, he says, well, he talks Turkish, nobody understands it. But the other answer was he lacks concision, which is correct. I agree with him. The kinds of things that I would say on Nightline you can't say in one sentence because they depart from standard religion. If you want to repeat the religion, you can get away with it between two commercials. If you want to say something that questions the religion, you're expected to give evidence, and that you can't do it between two commercials. So therefore you lack concision, so therefore you can't talk. Actually, that's a terrific technique of propaganda. To impose concision is a way of virtually guaranteeing that the party line gets repeated over and over again and that nothing else is heard.